Hello, everybody. Welcome to our final last Thursday of the season. We will see you again for our next first Thursday on September the 10th. So before I get going, I'd like to introduce 6 new people here tonight, which is John Lader, Gail and Robin, and Barbara Albrechtsons, and Maria Elena from Christusdars, who saw us on Zoom and just decided she had to be here. We also have our chef's boyfriend, Oliver, which is right there, and her grandparents, Modest and Cora. So welcome to Tailpiao, and we hope to see you back. Mati, slide, please. So I received a note from someone this week that they didn't receive our newsletter, but I found out online that they had, in fact, read it. So if you don't get a newsletter, write me, and I will make sure to send you another copy. Could I have my slides, please? One sec. Okay. So that's last week's cover for the newsletter. Okay, upcoming events. We have June 11th. Martis, next slide, please. Next week will be Novus, the game, the tricks, and the stories from 3 professionals. June 18th, we'll have a virtual film screening, Limousines Janju Nakts Krasa with subtitles. June 25th, we'll be celebrating Janja here with Christine Stead and Ingmars Ozolings. And then we go online for 2 virtual events during the summer. I also wanted to let you know that on this Monday, June 8th, our choir is singing at Christusdars at 10:45, if anybody would like to join them. So today's program. Next slide, please. Today's main presenter is Annika Lūsis, who describes herself as a third culture kid. Her great-grandfather was Archbishop Lūsis. As I was organizing today's event, I realized there's another reason these first Thursdays are special or they matter. They allow us to welcome Latvian guest speakers who may not speak Latvian. Among the 20 First Thursday programs we've had since September 2024, this is the first time that we've welcomed a Latvian guest who doesn't speak Latvian. So for TLPA, that feels like we're entering kind of a new era. Recently, I was actually speaking with a friend and a Latvian podcaster in Boston about possibly speaking here, and she said, well, I can't speak in Latvian because there's no words for my topic in Latvian, although she said she could take questions in Latvian. So that's kind of where we are, and it'll be great that we get people who are really into certain topics but have to present them in English. And food turns out to be a great way to explore questions. So my favorite part, next slide please. My favorite part is telling you how we found today's speaker. In March, I attended SHME, their annual seminar, where Annika gave a fascinating presentation about food and culture, and I went up to her right after the event. At the same time, the museum Latviešu Pasaulē, Latvians Abroad in Riga, is working on Māju Garsha, Taste of Home, a project exploring diaspora food and food memories. So we're bringing these 2 conversations together today. We have Marianna Auliciema joining us on Zoom from Riga. Together, they bring kind of 2 complementary perspectives, one from the kitchen and the other from stories and memories that shape identity. So we will explore how Latvian food keeps thriving, and whether that change may actually be one of the reasons it survives. And we will leave time for discussion and Q&As, so please think about questions while you're listening. Andre, bios, please.
Okay. Before I give the bios, Maruta has a quick word.
I think somebody picked up my Samsung telephone off of the front table because I can't find it. So if anybody has an extra telephone in their purse or pocket, it's mine. And the sound's turned off, so calling it doesn't help.
One of the hazards. Okay, well, the bios. First on Zoom we have from Latvia, Marianna Auliciema. Marianna Auliciema was born in Canada to Latvian parents. She was raised in Brisbane, Australia, but 24 years ago she returned to Latvia, the land from which her parents had fled at the end of the Second World War, and Latvia is where she now lives. She holds an honors BA from the University of Queensland, a graduate certificate in museology from Deakin University. In 2007, she was one of the founders and is now also the head curator of the Latvians Abroad Museum and Research Center in Riga. Her research focuses on developing methodologies for representing the life stories and community memory of the Latvian diaspora, with particular attention to the intersections of anthropology, migration, and museology. Marianna has had numerous projects at the museum, including the documentary films Varpa, The Promised Land on Latvian Baptist migration to Brazil, as well as Valiant, A Cause, and the Cold War, on Latvian political activism in the 1980s North America, which we were privileged to enjoy just a mere 2 weeks ago. She also has curated exhibitions on diaspora identity and folk costumes, and has directed the Story Quilt, which is a community heritage project involving over 1,000 contributions from Latvians abroad. She is currently leading the Taste of Home, a participatory research initiative on Latvian food traditions in the diaspora. Meanwhile, here in Centris in person, we have Annika Lūsis. Annika Lūsis, who is a Latvian-Filipino chef in Toronto, grew up in the Latvian community and spent her summers at Camp Sauerlein. She always had a great relationship with food and developed a love for the culinary arts, which was nurtured by her grandmother, who is of Filipino descent. With her grandmother, she would make Filipino spring rolls and traditional Latvian foods such as pīrāgi for her grandfather, who is of Latvian descent. Growing up, Annika often had summer jobs working in kitchens, but when COVID struck in 2020, she couldn't find kitchen work. So, as a 16-year-old Guelph collegiate student, she decided to create her own job and launched The Good Nick, which was an online business where she made, sold, and delivered chickpea-based edible cookie dough. Sounds good. That she developed herself. Annika marketed this as the cookie dough that your mother wants you to eat because it's much healthier than regular cookies. Okay, Annika, we'll talk about that later. Now, as a recent graduate of George Brown Polytechnic's Honors Bachelor's of Food Studies program, her interests include cooking and researching diasporic food communities. Her new specific interest has been looking at Latvian Canadian food scene and recipes as it traces back to her cultural roots. And now we're going to be entertained.
Sveiki, everyone. Hello. Sorry, could I get the slides, please? Thank you so much for the bio. All right, so yes, today I will be talking about how food and cultural identity intersect and relating it back to my own experience. All right, so first, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. So in front of you today, I made a little snack for you guys, which are Latvian lumpia. Anyone who's had Cora's lumpia in the past are familiar with our Filipino spring rolls. And this dish for me perfectly embodies who I am. This is like the two dishes she would make the most, my Latvian and Filipino side. So in these spring rolls, we have a traditional pīrāgi filling. However, I've also added some sauerkraut as well, so just to give it a little bit more oomph and body to it, and so it's not just all very fatty since it's all fried. And then we have a veggie option as well, which has mushrooms, fennel, garlic, and onion. So a little bit your standard vegetarian pīrāgi filling, but once again, with a few extra couple ingredients. I also have some sauces to pair with it as well. So I have dill sauce, which does have sour cream and mayo, and there's also a bit of Dijon, and what else do I have in there? A bit of onions, caramelized onions as well. Now, there is a beet sauce, which is pretty spicy, so I'm giving this warning out to everyone. It has pickled beets in it, and so it's more like a hot sauce. And it's a little sweet, a little tangy. It's very delicious, but yes, for people who are sensitive to spice, please be warned. All right, now that I have that out of the way, now we can start the presentation. And please, dig in and eat. All right, so just a little bit more about me. I believe Andres covered a lot of it, but just once again, just to get a little bit more to it. So yes, I've always loved food from an early age, and I think I was around maybe 12 or so when I finally decided this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a cook, and I spent every waking moment from there trying to get to that goal. So yes, I did also grow up, so I spent my summers always at Sauerlein, and I went from being a camper there every summer to then working in the kitchen. That was one of my first kitchen jobs, including volunteering at the church at various events. So yeah, as I worked in kitchens almost a decade to that effect. And so I've worked everywhere from fine dining to making my own business to even working in a bakery. And so currently now I'm working at a farmer's market on behalf of a vendor. So once again, trying to branch out my avenue and seeing new opportunities. So this is a bit of a typo, but I actually have graduated from the Honors Bachelor's of Food Studies program. And I had a thesis. My thesis project was looking into like the variety of cultures displayed within culinary school curriculum, specifically within their recipe books, to see what is being showcased and what isn't. So, and with that, I am planning on going to grad school to study these issues further and look at like how food and cultural identity intersect. However, yeah, as of now, I'm taking a gap year, so that's further down the line. So, just to get things started, I would like to pose a question to the audience about, for you all, what comes to mind when you guys think of, so how does food relate to cultural identity for you? There's no wrong answer. Feel free to shout out, raise a hand. Sure. You.
Question here. Okay. Coming right up.
Okay.
Hi, I'm not Latvian, so sorry. But I'm curious because I'm somebody who doesn't know my cultural background that deeply, and I'm not that in touch with it. And you seem to have gotten in touch with that culture since you don't speak the language, but would you say that your primary source of, cultural knowledge for yourself is through food? Is that
Yes.
the primary avenue?
I would say so, precisely that.
Yeah, you think that could be true for anyone?
I would argue yes. I think there's a lot of ways, and I think that's something that's really underdeveloped and underexplored. So that's why I'm very keen on exploring and hearing about people's stories as well. So yes, thank you. Just a teaser.
Good comment.
Oh, 1 second. Okay, yes. So food in relation to cultural identity, specifically what my audience member just said. So yeah, it is definitely, food is an important vessel. So it's a way to preserve culture and family traditions. As we all know, I'm sure many people in this room have had bonding moments with their family over making pīrāgi, for example. And it is a form of storytelling. So perhaps through that, you're making pīrāgi with your mother, and she's telling you how your grandmother used to make it a certain way, or used to use a certain ingredient instead. So it can be a form of storytelling. It's also, obviously, as all food is a form of nourishment and health. And for a lot of cultures, I know this is a big thing in Filipino culture, food is definitely an expression of love. It's like, especially for me, if I'm cooking for someone, that means I care for you, and I want to, obviously, show you how much you mean to me. And it definitely provides a sense of community. I mean, look at the beautiful audience we have today. We have everyone surrounded, obviously, like to hear and to eat some lovely lunch and also some lumpia. Okay, and then so just kind of drawing back to my own personal experience about like food and culture identity in my life. So first thing we're gonna start off is kind of like a little bit of family history. And so my grandfather, his mom wrote this cookbook. And so we have it this is the cover we have hanging back at my family's home. And so she wrote this with a variety of other women. And so before I go into my own personal journey, it's kind of amazing because it kind of shows how like this is a piece of, history and part of my culture that I can look back to and reference for years to come. All right, and then it's a little bit more about me. Marta already covered how, yes, I do not speak Latvian, but yeah, I grew up, I will say though, I am Latvian Filipino and my mom is Dutch. However, that side of the family, I'm not really as connected with my Dutch side, unfortunately. Like I don't speak Dutch, don't really cook much of the food, but I feel like as though Latvian food is something I've really connected to over the years because I think I grew up, of all the cultures, I grew up predominantly Latvian. Yes, I went to Salaina as a kid, and I have been a lot more affluent in the community as opposed to with my Filipino side, we would go to, my grandmother would have a big party where she invited all our side of the family, and I think that would be once a year, and then we'd go to a Christmas party. So it's like twice a year, But that being said, I have a lot more Filipino friends I meet out in the world than Latvians. Like, I feel like with this community so tight-knit. And so my Latvian friends I've known since I was 5 because we went to Salina together. But yes, I always grew up loving food and liking food, but however, never feeling as though I kind of had a place because I never felt as though I belonged to a certain culture because I didn't speak Latvian, but I felt as though I was more Latvian than Filipino, but then I didn't feel as though I was Filipino enough as well, and it was just really confusing growing up, and especially like trying to figure out like what is my thing and like what's my identity. So I really found that through food, and so actually, funnily enough, one of the middle pictures is me making pīrāgi, and the other one is me selling lumpia at a market, and so these are these two dishes, which I've combined together for you guys, just kind of perfectly embody like how I was finding my self-expression through food. And so it was a no-brainer then to go to culinary school, as you guys can see. And through there I found a great sense of community, and it was like this aha moment of like all these things I was feeling I was able to express through research and other, like even just through the way I made dishes. And then, yes, through that, and then so my family's originally from Guelph, and so I moved to Toronto full-time, and so I started working in the industry, and I was working in a fine dining restaurant on Queen West in Ossington called Andor, so it was doing modern Canadian food, which is one of the dishes there is a deviled egg dish inspired by the owner's grandmother, so it's like a Chinese version of a deviled egg. It's delicious, by the way. But just kind of to show like how food can evolve and be reflective of all our identities. And then, so I think the grand finale of this, really to kind of show, so last November I competed in a cooking competition called Cook the Books, and the theme of the competition was, so it was sponsored by Canada Beef, so you have to pick a cut of beef, and then you have to execute the dish under 60 minutes. So for me, I was paired with another Filipino girl. We were doing it together. And the theme was, yes, Canadian produce, but using like flavors of home, like your own international cultural identity. So we were like, perfect. So we decided to do a Filipino dish. And so it is a take on multiple different dishes, but I'm not sure if you guys can quite see here, but like right in the corner, it almost looks like kind of like a cookie, and there's some beetroot on top. So that is my take on lumpia, which is, so in that dish, it's stuffed with rice, kidney, a bunch of aromatics, and then topped with a beetroot salad, and then it's grilled short ribs with the peanut sauce, which is similar to a Filipino peanut stew, which is really delicious. And then there's a squash puto, which is a steamed rice cake. So although, unfortunately, we did not win the competition, and I'm slightly still bitter about it, but it was an amazing experience altogether, and I wouldn't like regret it for the world. It was amazing, but just kind of go to show of like how much you can take your identity and put it into a dish and put it out to the world. So, okay, now we're going back to third culture kids. So I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the term, but so yeah, third culture kids everywhere and nowhere. So it's a term that was created in the 1950s in reference to children who grew up in a culture other than that of their parents. So very much kind of the similar themes I've been touching on of juggling multiple identities, but you feel as though you don't resonate with one. There's this really good cookbook that I now own called Third Culture Cooking. So it's like a movement that's been created. The cookbook is by Zainab Issa. I really recommend it to anyone who's looking for a new cookbook. And yeah, so I was joking about to my professor about how I was like, there should be fourth culture kids, like the grandchildren of immigrants, like myself. But I'm sure that even like the third culture kids movement can very much resonate in this community, especially with your children or perhaps yourselves, like the children whose parents came from Latvia and now they are Latvian Canadians. So then we can go, so now we're kind of going into a little bit similar threads, so going into the complexities of quote-unquote authentic food. Because I'm sure we've always been told, some of you have been told while cooking something by someone else, it's like, no, this isn't the proper way to do this isn't the authentic way. So yes, while that is true, But food is never the same. Recipes change, and they definitely evolve over time. Obviously, Latvian lumpia is definitely not something that will be traditional at all. So, and I think, but there's also, the flip side of it is also that you don't want to be culturally appropriating. And so for context, so I guess an example of cultural appropriation would be someone taking something from another culture, but not giving them the proper representation or like the proper awareness and not letting them know is from that culture. So say if I wasn't Latvian, I try pīrāgi, I really like it, and then I decide to go serve it in my restaurant, but instead of baked, it's boiled, and instead of ham, it's ground beef. But I don't say it's Latvian, I say it's my own creation. So that would be like a problem, that would be a case that is problematic. So, and then also an important thing to remember as well is also like the Canadian food scene is ever evolving. Like we have so many cultures there, especially with globalization, we have so many cultures in this city, beautiful city of ours. I mean, yeah, I'm very curious to see if there's any other Latvian Filipinos out there who can relate to my experience. And then also just kind of the final kind of point is that, yes, I'm a big fan of authenticity. I'm very much for authenticity, especially as like learn the basics, and especially as someone who knows a decent amount about Latvian food but wants to learn more. I would like to learn more. I want to learn the basics because from there, then you can build and also evolve, especially with Latvian cuisine, which it doesn't have, obviously in our community, it has a great reputation, but you're never going to find pīrāgi sold in a supermarket in Canada or in a bakery. So yeah, perhaps then if we take our food and also evolve it further, then there'll be more opportunities for us. And the final kind of question or just like thought I pose for this slide is like, what does authentic food look like for third or fourth culture kids? Like what will it look like in 50 years? Is there still going to be dill on everything? Is pīrāgi only going to be vegetarian now, or is it, maybe it'll be boiled, who knows? I don't know, probably not. But all that to say is that, yes, food is ever evolving, and I think we should embrace that, but also obviously embrace our roots and where we come from. So, my hopes for the future. I think I've kind of touched on a lot of these points quite a bit throughout this slideshow, but just one more time I would love to see more of this emergence of third and fourth culture cooking and recipes, especially in these younger generations, and seeing like how they take the grandmother's traditional recipe and make it their own. And then another thing I would love to see is more Latvian dishes featured in the mainstream media. Every time I bring pīrāgi to anyone who isn't Latvian, they love it. And like that would be my goal one day, is being able to like sell it at a farmer's market or something, and just trying to bring it forth to the main stage, because we have a very interesting food diaspora, and I think it should be focused more. And finally, I feel like this kind of goes without saying, my hope is that there's just going to be even more delicious food. And so yeah, with that, thank you so much, and I would like to hand it over to Marianna, and yes, thank you so much, guys.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Thank you, Annika, for your presentation, and labu appetit visiem. I understand you're all having a yummy lunch there, and I'm sorry that I can't be there to try out Annika's Latvian lumpia. It sounds amazing, and it sounds like it fits very well into our museum's project. If you don't know anything about our museum, Latviešu pasaulē, or Latvians Abroad, we're a museum who's been working for 19 years now, collecting stories, objects, interviews, photographs from Latvians who live outside Latvia. And we're looking at not only recording the journeys of people who've left Latvia for many different reasons, including, of course, refugees in the Second World War, but also people who've left more recently. But we're also interested in documenting the lives of Latvians outside Latvia, how they live today, what kind of food they eat, what their social life looks like, what their communities are like. So I wanted to today talk a little bit about our project, Taste of Home, or Māju Garsha. And listening to Annika's presentation, I think I'm going to be repeating or talking about similar things, which I think is an encouraging thing to look at the fact that we're thinking along the same lines, and possibly we'll have an interesting conversation about this afterwards. But I'll put on my slides now, if I can work out how to do it. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Last year in 2025, we started in the museum a new project called Mayugarsha, and the idea was that we wanted to record stories about Latvian food in the diaspora. We wanted to collect objects, photographs, and people's own stories. So we were interviewing a lot of people about their experiences with these different foods. And the way we decided to do it was it's like a crowdsourced approach, which meant that we divided up from September 10 months into different months where we talked about different themes, because the topics seemed so huge that we had to divide it up. So as you can see in here, you can see September we talked about recipe books and ingredients. In January, for example, we talked about soups. And just tonight we've released our very last episode, if you like, because we're making it like a TV, or not a TV, but a YouTube program. Tonight we released our last program about cakes and klingeri. But as you can see, the crowdsourced part was us inviting people to tell us their stories. You could go onto our website and tell us your story, or email us in any way, and we would interview people every month and make, as I said, a YouTube program. And here you can see us working in our office in Bad Gabazars, which is also our exhibition space. And Ieva Vitol, you can see my colleague Ieva Vitol and I would present approximately 1 hour of conversation about the food in question. So we'd have excerpts from interviews where people were telling us their recipes, their special memories to do with these foods. We'd look at photographs from the collection and so forth. All of these are available online, and you can also see that we have a website where all of these stories are also compiled. So it's like an online archive, if you like, because the stories, we keep adding to the stories, and they're both in English and Latvian, and you can keep looking, and every month there should be new stories added. At the end of this project, we've now finished our kind of collection of information this month, and then now we've started writing a book, and the book's going to be called Mayugarsha, and it will be available from November. If you talk to people about museums, many people might say, what is a museum doing talking so much about food? Aren't you meant to be talking about history? And of course, we are talking about history in this project. We're also talking about culture and about the way that people use food to connect with their families, with their family history, with their past, with their the way that they feel like they're at home. So it's food can be also seen as like something that helps you develop your own personal identity or your Latvian identity, because it's not just sustenance, it's also your connection to comfort and to home. Here you can see people with different foods. I don't know, you might recognise on the left there's ligetkunze. We photographed in Hamilton about 10 years ago when we were doing fieldwork in Hamilton, and on the right we have Ilga, who lives in Norway, and she was making sauerkraut last autumn, and she sent us this photo. So there's a personal identity dimension to food, obviously, but there's also parts of food that connect us to our previous generations. So by making and tasting different foods that are familiar to us, we remember people that are still with us, people who we used to know who are no longer with us. We remember our grandparents, we remember our parents, we remember tastes from childhood, and these things we carry with us. Here you can see on the left is Latvian cookbook that was published in Latvia originally in the 1930s, but this is a republication of the same book that was published in a German displaced persons camp in Fischbacher. And it's actually a book that many, many Latvians took with them when they travelled away from Germany to their new countries where they started to build a new life. And many of us have this book at home, and I would guess that many of us have also inherited this book from our parents or our grandparents. And many of us also still use this book today to get little tips and tricks about Latvian recipes that we know. On the right, we can see a handwritten recipe. This has been sent to us by Ines Grava-Gubiņa from Toronto, and this is her auntie's recipe for kliņģeris. And during the project, my gosh, we've had many conversations with Ines about her feeling for Latvian food and the way that that has come to her through her mother and her mother's sisters and her other aunties and uncles, and how they've taught her a lot. She knows about Latvian cooking. Another aspect of food in the diaspora is not just about remembering, but it's also about doing, and it's also about very active communication through generations, about passing on generational knowledge, and Annika already spoke about this. So it's a wonderful way of being together and participating in celebrations. As Annika said, it's a form of storytelling. It's a way that you can tell stories about family and about culture and about language to the next generations while you're doing something that's interesting and also helps to solidify this experience. So here you can see various cross-generational pīrāgi making and other different food being made. But food's also, of course, about community, and oftentimes when we go to Latvian house, we also experience Latvian food that perhaps we haven't tasted at home. So we start to associate our cultural experiences with our culinary experiences. And here you can see scouts or guides with the kliņģeris. It involves conversations about food, about what we eat and what makes us similar, because we might have the same taste, and what makes us different to others, because we might go to school, for example, and nobody understands a kliņģeris, or nobody understands why I have aknu pastēt on my brown bread for a sandwich while other kids have got white bread with Vegemite, which would be my experience in Australia. I'm sure you have similar experiences in Canada or America. So it brings together a community in some ways, not just by eating the same foods, but by realizing that we eat this, but other people don't. Here you can see part of food and community is all about catering for events and special events. And here you can see Inta and Dace, who have a catering company in Philadelphia called Zinta Galts. And they've worked for many years catering Latvian events. They've sent many, many kliņģeri and pīrāgi by mail to other Latvians who feel that they need to have this at Christmas or for a special occasion. So this is also about community. On the left, we see a cake that was made in Bergen, and this lady who had made this cake said, I only started cooking Latvian cakes when I left Latvia. So she's a recent migrant, and she found that the community actually required her to start making these Latvian things, and she herself has been learning more about her Latvian cultural heritage and culinary heritage living outside Latvia. And then another dimension of why we're interested in this food and why it's so important, I think, for our identity is that it's a way that we can communicate with people who aren't Latvian. So we've heard many stories. This photo example is from Shanghai, from a Latvian lady who has started a tradition of making gingerbread or piparkūkas at Christmas time and inviting over friends of different cultures and backgrounds as a way to show them something about herself and about her own tradition. And this is what we do a lot of the time. We can invite people over for dinner, and it tells them a little bit about who we are, and who we are is partly what we eat. And this is another example of that. This is an example of how earlier, when there were multicultural fairs, often there would be a Latvian stall, say, at a multicultural market. And this is an example of where Latvian food is being used to tell about a country that is occupied. And in this interview, we heard about how the folk costumes were very important. There was a map of Latvia, and how the story about Latvia, about occupation, about this beautiful country came through people coming to taste the food. So food's also used here as a way to communicate about other parts of Latvia. So, not to speak for too much longer, but so these are the last two slides. These are from our project. We've been starting to make some of the recipes that people have told us, and we've been photographing them for the book that we'll be publishing soon. And this particular combination of pictures is to suggest an observation that we've made during the research project, or to make a statement, and perhaps we could talk about this later, Marta, is about what's really Latvian food. Because on the left we have Auliciems, which many of you might know, especially if you're a Second World War migrant, or not migrant, but refugee that came to Canada after the Second World War, or a child of a Second World War refugee. You might be familiar with this cake. You probably are. It's called Auliciems, and it's been quite a popular cake in the diaspora since the Second World War refugees came to Canada. But in Latvia, this cake is not really well known by anybody. And you mentioned Auliciems here in Latvia, and people often don't know what you're talking about, because this cake was popular between the wars in the first part of Latvian independence, the first time. But since the Soviet era, it hasn't made another appearance. So this is a very Latvian dish for many, many Latvians living outside Latvia. Whereas on the right, we have medus, which is very popular in Latvia today. But I would guess that many people living in the diaspora or outside Latvia haven't really heard of medus, or mightn't have eaten medus until quite recently. This medus became very popular during the Soviet era in Latvia. And now today, it's a traditional cake that people eat here, that's now become popular, as I understand it, also outside Latvia. But when you talk about a taste of home, what makes you feel like it's something that you know from previous generations? The one on the left is a very Latvian food for many people, and the one on the right is their taste of home, but they're also Latvians. So how does this work? Another example we have is rasols, and the pink rasols on the left has beets in it, and it's familiar to a lot of people living outside Latvia. And on the right is rasols that you will find in Rimi here in Latvia, and it doesn't have beets in it. And this constant debate, which I'm sure everyone's had, about what colour is rasols and which one is the real rasols. And all of these conversations we've been having during our project, Māju Garša, and I'll be excited to talk about some of these things with you later on. So thank you for your time. It's a little bit more about our website address, mājugarša.lv, and the book will be available from November. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianna, for your fantastic talk from Riga. And thank you for Annika for the Latvian lumpia that she was making 200 of them in the kitchen this morning here. And your excellent talk as well. So first question I'd like to ask to each of you is, what do you remember the most from each other's talk? Who'd like to start? Or what stands out of everything they said? What kind of stuck with you?
I can start, actually. Here, hopefully this is on. Actually, the thing that stuck out the most was just your final point, specifically when the two cakes, because I've heard that before from various people about the difference between how certain Latvian dishes, how, like going back to, I obviously talked at length about is like the evolution of cuisine, but like I find that very interesting, the fact that it's like in the diaspora that like you have these old-timey recipes that people back home aren't necessarily eating as much. And even then, when I was looking at, I think, the cake towards the one with the layers, the one that's eaten in Latvia today, it reminded me a lot of, there's like a Russian tea cake that looks really similar to that, or Napoleon cake. So it was just, I don't know, that struck me and I thought that was really interesting.
Awesome, Marianna.
Oh, I think I found the most interesting part of Annika's talk was just the Filipino part. I find that that's a fascinating combination, and I immediately thought I'd love to interview you, Annika, and I'd love to have you as part of our project. But I think onwards from that, I think it's very interesting that you say that you don't speak Latvian, but you find your Latvian connection through food. And we'd made this discovery as well. I remember we were in Brazil and we were meeting with people who no longer speak Latvian, who are actually descended from Latvians who left Latvia after the First World War, so in 1920s. And so they're, I think, second or even third generation living in Brazil already. And these people, we sat down to dinner, and almost every single dinner time, these people are Latvian, they say they're Latvian, but they don't speak Latvian. But every single dinner time, through a translator, we would have to explain to them, they would always ask, how do you make sauerkraut, like skābja kāposti? Because grandma used to do this. And this is really our taste of being Latvian. And please explain to us again how to do it. And so we were explaining over and over how to do this, because people really found that the food was the thing that connected them to their grandparents and to their family and their heritage. And it's exciting for me to hear that you have that experience as well.
Beautiful. So what does make food Latvian? Does it have to be from Latvia? Does it have to be someone who makes it who is Latvian?
Well, can I answer
Go
that
ahead.
first? Or
You go,
I could go. Well, this was actually my point at the end, was that what's Latvian for one Latvian is not Latvian for the other Latvian, but they're both Latvians. So how does that work? And my conclusion, and perhaps you will not agree, but my conclusion is that it's about the context. And when we were speaking to Latvians in Denmark who have very recently left Latvia, we say to them, do you cook Latvian food? Do you enjoy Latvian food? And they said, oh yes, we're so homesick. We can't wait to have shashlik and augstā zupa and soljanka and meduskulka. And they named 4 things that to them makes them homesick to think about this food, and that is Latvian food to them. And if you've grown up outside Latvia after the Second World War, you don't even know what shashlik, augstā zupa, and with the beets, augstā zupa, you might not even know what these 4 things are, because for many people out after the Second World War, this wasn't Latvian food. But my point is, maybe it's not the food. Maybe it's what you associate with the food, how you grew up, what you remember from your childhood, from your homeland. But is it about the actual food?
Mm-hmm. No, I 100% agree. I think for me as well, it's like, yeah, I think context. And it's also, I think for me, it's a loaded question, because I'm like, yeah, I don't really feel too Latvian sometimes. So of course, for me, Latvian food is very much different from then what I'm sure people in Riga, or even some of the grandmothers here probably might not be very pleased with Latvian lumpia, but it's all about context, and as also the intention as well, I think, is a big part of it too. But yeah.
Okay, that leads perfectly into my next question. So if Annika submitted Latvian lumpia to Mājasgarš, the project, would you accept it as Latvian food?
I think we would, because our project isn't about defining whether this is Latvian food or not. We're interested in what you see as Latvian food, what gives you the taste of home. And so we would definitely be very interested in Annika's story. I can give one more example if I have time. we've been having a lot of debates at work. It's been a process for us because we had one story from Ines Agravagubiņa actually about a soup that she made during Garazat's cooking class. She made frikadei zupa, a meatball soup. And the kids were like, yeah, okay. So the next year she thought, how are we going to make this soup to make it more interesting, and so she decided to add some Thai spices to the soup and make like a Thai-style frikadei zupa with coconut milk and with galangal and with the other things she added. And we've been talking the whole time about, can you call this frikadei zupa? What makes frikadei zupa? What is the thing that makes it the Latvian frikadei zupa? And how far can you go away from the original before it's too far? And we've actually found during this project that you can go pretty far.
Great. So that will lead into my last question before we move to the Q&A. So how important, talking about context, are community gatherings like these in keeping food traditions alive? And is it the recipe that's important, or is it the gathering around the table?
Yeah, if you don't, I can start with that. I think they're essential. Truly they are, because it's even within communities, then it becomes a thing as well, where it's like that you can bring even more people in. And so, like, I know, for example, I saw online that there were a bunch of campers I grew up with who were just like friends of a friend of a friend. And so I think that even will help expand and show people what Latvian food can be. And yes, the recipes are obviously essential, but it's also like perhaps then someone comes and they're like, oh, this is a good way to do something, but like here's a better way to do it. So,
Marianna.
Well, I think the recipes are very important, and I think to be fair, in order to make the crazy variations we've been talking about, you have to have a very good knowledge of the basics of what really, like, what is a pīrāgs. So you have to understand that before you decide to change it, and you have to understand what frikadei zupa is before you add something extra. So I think obviously the recipes are very important, but the sitting around the, was that the question?
Yeah,
sorry if it wasn't the question.
Community.
And community, well, community is obviously, yes, sitting around the table is the most important thing. That would be my argument, because that's the context. They're the people that are around us, sometimes the language that's being spoken around us and what we're talking about and the things that we associate with the food. Is it parents? Is it friends? Are they conversations? Are they songs? All of those things go together. And without the people and without the community, don't know.
Thank you. So that now takes us to the Q&A. And here we are sitting around tables eating. As a beginner, could anybody, to begin, is anybody willing to talk about a food memory, something that they really remember about food in their lives that they can't live without, or some event that happened with food? We've got one at the back there. We'd love to hear your experiences.
Mark here, two quick experiences. My grandmother made pīrāgi, which were the size of my fist, which were huge. And I remember when I moved to Toronto, I baked pīrāgi and I brought them to one of the choir members at one of the choirs, and she said, oh, these are faux pīrāgi. And it's funny because those faux pīrāgi have had 40 years of feeding other people and letting them experience pīrāgi, and they've loved them. The one thing I could not and will never eat is head cheese, which my grandmother used to make. And I don't know what it's called in Latvian, but it's nothing, galets. I would never offer that to a friend because I couldn't stomach it myself.
I think, while we think of more questions, I think Marianna can give us a couple of words about galards, which was one of their monthly projects.
Yeah. Gullets, that was one of our topics, and yep, it's pretty much divided there on the opinions about gullets. But I can admit that I wasn't a big gullets fan because it was the whole concept. I think it's a little bit about what you're thinking. You don't know how it's made, and then there's the gristly bits, and you know. But we actually have started at the museum also making the foods that we're talking about and using a lot of the recipes people have told us from the diaspora. And we made gullets the other day. Our director, Aldis, made gullets and brought it to work, and it was wonderful. So can I encourage you to maybe just give gullets another go. I think gullets has had a bad rap in the past.
Okay, question from Natalia Tannis.
Man interesē tas, kad mēs iemācījāmies, ka iebraucam Kanādā no mūsu vecāku gadgājumu biskvītu kūku. Un tieši biskvītu kūku, man liekas, Latvijā netiek cept vairs. Un arī apakšā ar smilšu apakšu, sauc smilšu kūks apakšu.
I'll translate that first. Natalie is wondering about smilšakuka and what was the other one? And biskvītkuka. Oh, sponge cake, biskvītkuka and smilšakuka.
Me?
Sure, yes, please.
Well, biscuit kūka as such, I'm not an expert about what cake you can get here, but I think biscuit sponge is what they use in the roulettes that you can buy everywhere in Latvia here. So I think the whole biscuits is something that is made in Latvia, but biscuit kūka ar smilšu mīklu I'm not aware of.
Thank you. We do have a memory here, and everybody, come on, you've got food memories.
Well, I have I also write poetry, and I was thinking about not so much food, but a flavor. And the flavor was caraway. And I feel that when I think of caraway, it actually also almost makes me cry. Yeah, because it just reminds me of cooking an ingredient that I had as a child.
Thank you. Thank you, Lilita. Okay, if no comments, just a tear. Thank you. Over a question on the other side of the room, please.
Sveiki, Marianna, Ēdiens.
Oh, ciao, Ines.
Sveiki. What I'm going to comment on was I loved when you compare the Alexander Kook to the Medes Kook. About 20-some years ago, at Garazets, when my kiddo was a camper still, they brought in the kitchen staff. They brought the chef, cook, and everybody. They got people from Latvia to come in to cook for the kids. And everybody was all enthusiastic, thought, oh, this is going to be great. The kids are going to just love this. The kids hated it because they were making stuff like solyanka. And the kids are like, what's solyanka? That looks disgusting. And they wouldn't eat it. And it was a very strange, I would say, transition where the chefs from Latvia had to realize that the kids from North America did not know what they were making and did not want to eat this stuff. And although it was, I think, good to expose them, the kids kind of, there were a few meals where the kids were rather hungry because they did not want to eat the kind of things that they were being served. So it was a very eye-opening experience, I think, on both sides. And they finally sat the chefs down and said, this is what the kids will eat. They wanted the hamburgers and the mac and cheese and things like that, and not solyanka. And I can't even remember some of the other things because we as the parents would look at the list and go, what is that? You know, and I have no idea. And we knew the kids were not going to eat this because they had no idea what it was. But it's another, I think, example of how food traditions move in different directions. Like the language in Latvia, as well as language here. There's words in Latvia where the one example we always talk about is a friend of mine's mother went into Kafejnīca in Riga, and she wanted a piece of nice torta with her coffee. And she asked for kūkšķēli. And the lady who was waiting on her said, oh, jums vajadzētu kēku slaisīt. And it's like, and it was like, what? Kēku slaisīt, nevis kūkšķēlīt?
Thank you. Paldies, Inesa. Thank you so much. So as we're seeing here right now, we're talking about different generations, different places around the world. Even in this room, we have a lot of generations and different experiences. So Annika, as you were listening to these stories from a different generation and from Latvia, what is kind of resonating with you, or you're thinking, what is this? to throw that at you right now,
It's,
especially with your experience growing up. Like,
Well, I think it's really interesting. Once again, it's just it's this thing of this almost like it's almost like a push and pull between like home and here, or I guess you can call them both home. I should say that, but it's just to see the ways in which flavor and memory evolve through time, through the ocean, through different countries. It's incredible, and I think that it's super interesting to hear everyone's stories and kind of just what really resonates with me, I guess, at the end of the day is like, despite everyone's different experiences, everyone has some experience when it comes to food and some memory and some, like, it all goes back to food. It really just all goes back to food, which obviously resonates with me very deeply.
thank you so much. We're going to wrap up. Would either of you like to make some closing remarks?
Other than thank you so much for having me, and I hope everyone enjoyed the meal. If anyone's interested in ordering if anyone liked it and is interested in ordering a batch, please let me know. And it was so nice to meet you, Marianna.
Yeah, paldies visiem. Thank you very much for having me. And thanks, Annika. Maybe we can have a little interview sometime.
Yes, hopefully. It
That
sounds
sounds
good.
great.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Thank you, both of you.
Paldies.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. We will see you next week for the tricks and tips of Novus.
Oh my gosh. Balti. This is beautiful. Oh my gosh. Baltias. Thank you so much. This is the perfect. I'm going to ask for this instead of flowers every time. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
That's a non-Latvian salad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. There's sage in here, so.
Also, we have herbs on the table instead of plant or flowers this week, so please make your decision on who can take it home. And we're also selling salad and lunch for $5. Thank you.
Can I give this to
Līdz nākošajai nedēļai. Bye for now.